Hello and good morning, everybody. This is Jake, and we are here for another great webinar. Um, Based on a little bit of feedback and by popular demand, we are doing another text webinar. This one's going to be very focused on TrueType fonts. If anybody watched the last one on fonts and making text work in CAD, we covered all kinds of stuff just in general with SHX. Um, Dived a little bit into TrueType, but this one, there were so many questions about, how do we work with TrueType and kind of the pros and cons, I guess, and issues that you might run into that we felt like this would be a really good one to kind of cover. So before we really get too far into it, welcome everybody that's attending live. This is going to be a great time for some Q&A stuff. So please open that Q&A button there at the bottom of the screen and make sure you have that ready to go. Please, please, please type any questions that you might have. We will do our best to answer them to the best of our abilities. And if anything that we cannot answer in this webinar, we're happy to follow up with you too. So feel free to start typing those questions in now. There is the little chat button as well. That's a great way to just have a little bit of banter back and forth, different workflows and stuff, but definitely try to keep the questions there in the Q&A so that we can see those and answer those properly. A reminder that this is also being recorded. So by Monday, we will have that recording up on the website and you'll be able to watch it again. So I think without too much further ado, I don't want to spoil what we're going to get into, but I'm going to pass this over to James.
Hello, good morning. Thanks for getting us going, Jake. Like he said, this is all going to be recorded. So if you want to revisit any of the steps that we covered today, you'll be able to find it no problem on our website. This is a picture of me. At Land Effects, I do many things, but my primary focuses are on content creation, manufacturer relations, and video production. So with that being said, I'm excited to take you down the path of TrueType fonts today. Before we get into things too deeply, this is a quick outline of what we're going to look at today, kind of the order that we're going to go through everything. We're going to discuss the primary font types used in CAD. So that's going to be SHX fonts and TrueType fonts. I have in parentheses there TTF. That is the file extension for TrueType fonts. So if you hear me say a TTF font or a TrueType font, I'm going to be using those interchangeably today. I just want to clear that up so there's no confusion. Also not listed here, there's another type of font that you're going to encounter called an open type font or an OTF font. And while those are really nice and there's lots of them available, unfortunately, Autodesk doesn't support the use of OTFs. So we might encounter them or have them on our computers already. Unfortunately, there's nothing we can do about that on the CAD side. So just be aware of that as we go through this today. After that, we're going to discuss why TrueType fonts are superior to SHX fonts. There's a lot of debate on the internet. We're kind of here to put that to rest a bit. TrueType fonts are going to be superior in appearance and performance. And we understand that if you are currently using SHX fonts, it might be a little bit of a bitter pill to swallow to switch over, but we know you'll be happy you did if you do make the jump. We'll talk about sourcing TrueType fonts. There's definitely a vast collection of places to get fonts on the internet. So what we'll do today is we'll show you some of our favorite sources and some places that we trust to get fonts from. There's going to be many free versions and paid versions out there. And in doing my research for this presentation, I was actually pleasantly shocked about how many high quality free fonts are available. Fonts seem to be against the grain in terms of being paid or being available for free. There's a lot of really good free fonts. So I'm excited to show you guys how many are out there and where you can get some. We're going to cover installing fonts, specifically how to install a TrueType font. and we'll go through how to download them, install them on your computer, and then how to use them in CAD. And last but not least, we'll talk about troubleshooting any issues that you might run into when you're using TrueType fonts. One of the huge advantages to TrueType fonts is there's very little that can go wrong with them. They're very reliable and consistent. So this point almost doesn't need to be touched on, but we'll just touch on it anyways to be thorough. Really quick, let's just compare or look at some basic bullet points on what an SHX font is and what a TrueType font is. So we'll start with SHX. They're compiled shape files. We're not going to get into the weeds on that very much, but if you're ever looking at Autodesk documentation or you're on forums or something and you see the mention of compiled shapefiles, just know that that could be relating to an SHX font. SHX fonts were developed by AutoCAD and therefore they're unique to AutoCAD. As far as I'm aware, I don't know if they're used in any other popular programs or softwares. Maybe they're out there in some other CAD programs, but I don't think so. They've been in use for over 30 years, so they've been around a while, and they were the original fonts supported by AutoCAD. So many of you guys that have been using CAD for a long time are probably very familiar with SHX fonts and probably use them often. This next point, color-based line weights. I don't know if that's necessarily the best way to word it, but SHX fonts are treated like your lines or polylines in CAD. Their line weight is going to be determined by their layer and color setting, and that's going to tie into your CTB file. The main takeaway there is I see this as in the debate online about SHX versus TTF. A lot of people will put this in the pro column for an SHX font, but maybe that was the case earlier on when TTFs were just getting on their feet. A big critique of TTF fonts where you only had a regular and a bold version of the font. And as you'll see later in the presentation today, that's just simply not the case. So while that might have been a strength for an SHX font in the past, now it's more of a liability. There's a lot more room to introduce human error. If you are doing match properties or something in a drawing, or for whatever reason you accidentally put a piece of text on the wrong layer or have it set to the wrong color, then when you go to plot, you could run into issues and suddenly you've created a troubleshooting scenario for yourself. One thing that is nice about SHX fonts is they can live in a shared location because they're part of AutoCAD. Anyone in the office can access that SHX font if it's in a shared location without having to install the font on every machine. So that is one little bonus of an SHX font. But that is not enough to make us recommend them. TTF fonts or TrueType fonts, on the other hand, they were developed by Apple. They are the primary font type for Windows, Linux, and many other operating systems. You know, Android, pretty much anyone out there can support a TrueType font. They've also been in use for over 20 years, so they haven't been around quite as long as SHX fonts, but they've been around the block a couple of times. And this point, textile base line weights, as you'll see later, there's a lot more options and freedom now in TrueType fonts to have different textiles set up with different line weights of that font. So you'll have things like regular, bold, thin, italic, and so on. Not every font, but most of the high quality TrueType fonts will have a font family. So you get all of those different options in the same font. And then one thing to note about a TrueType font is they need to be installed per computer. So if you incorporate a custom TrueType font as one of your defaults for your office standard, you'll need to make sure that anyone using CAD has that font installed on their machine. So let's kind of dig into this a little more. Like, why are TrueType fonts superior to SHX fonts? The first thing is going to be complete character sets. This is oftentimes a matter of quality control. I've noticed in my own experience that when using SHX fonts, occasionally there'll be a missing character. One that I see most often is the degree symbol. If you're going to dimension an angle, a lot of the SHX fonts seem to not have the degree symbol. Some do, but not all of them. And that's just one example. So when you're talking about a font, you're going to have character sets or glyph sets, and this is going to be something that looks kind of like this. This is just a quick screenshot of a single font's glyph or character set. And as you can see, there's numbers, letters, uppercase and lowercase, punctuation, special characters, currency symbols, and all of that. Most TTF fonts have a more robust or a more well built out character set. So that is one advantage to using the TrueType fonts. Beyond that, they're going to be vastly superior in PDF support. So with TrueType fonts being based on vector graphics, scaling and sizing is not an issue. As you scale up or down, they maintain their clarity and their crisp edges. So they tend to look more professional, and they're more versatile in that sense. They can also be imported from a PDF. So if you're importing a PDF into CAD, you'll be able to import the TrueType font from that PDF, whereas SHX fonts cannot be imported in that manner. Taking a quick look here is an example of a PDF created with an SHX font, and it looks fine and everything. This particular font is pretty decent, but if you were to zoom in on that, the font can look a little pixelated, or if you're going to scale, you can run into issues with that. Here's a similar PDF created with a TrueType font, and as you can see, everything's just a little bit more crisp around the edges, a little cleaner. And regardless of what size you make this PDF, the text is going to maintain that nice clean look. It's also important to note that when you're working with people outside of CAD and you're sending them PDFs, anyone that is going to be using PDFs is going to be more set up and equipped to deal with TrueType fonts. So if you're sending a PDF to a client that doesn't use CAD, or to another office that doesn't use CAD, a TTF font will just be slightly advantageous in that sense as well. Like I mentioned in the previous slide with how the line weights are determined with the fonts, and like we just mentioned in the bullet point above with the PDFs, you're going to just run into far less plotting issues when you use TrueType fonts. It removes a lot of the human error from the equation, so you don't have to fuss with your text settings as much when you're plotting. And then, like I mentioned before, the cross-platform compatibility. Pretty much everything under the sun can support TrueType fonts. So you're just going to have less fringe issues, weird issues when you're sending things to other platforms. Sourcing TrueType fonts is going to be a big portion of what we talk about today. There are definitely a number of things you want to look for when you're sourcing them. Here is a list of sources that we've used, and we've gotten fonts and tested from these sources. Now, there's one here that I want to note, Adobe font. If you don't have an Adobe subscription, you're probably not going to be able to access them. I've read mixed things about Adobe saying that some of their fonts are free, but I wasn't able to find those. Every time I tried to access them, it required me to log into my Adobe subscription account. Another note on that is, as far as I can tell, most Adobe fonts are going to be OpenType fonts. So they're not going to be useful for us working in CAD anyways. I just wanted to mention them there because a lot of those OTF fonts that Adobe uses are based off of Type 1 fonts. And there's a lot of TrueType fonts that are also based off of Type 1 fonts. So if you find an Adobe font, or you have an Adobe font that you love, the moral of the story there is there's a high probability you'll be able to find a TrueType equivalent in one of these other sources. When we talk about installing TrueType fonts, it's pretty straightforward. You just download it. One note is you want to install it for all users on the computer. If you have a machine in your office that is shared by more than one person, or you just have multiple profiles on that machine, you want to make sure that the font is installed for all users on that machine, not just the one login that you're on. You'll want to confirm that the font is listed in your text style manager in CAD. That'll be the first place you can see an issue, is if you install a font and then you open your text style manager and it's not in the list, then it's time to figure out why. A lot of times this will happen if you install an OTF, an OpenType font, and you don't realize that it is an OpenType font, and then you're confused why it's not in CAD. Again, it's because CAD doesn't support them. And beyond that, we'll show you how to use and place the fonts in CAD. So we'll go through the whole process here today. And then lastly, we'll talk about checking for issues with those fonts. I'll show you a few things to look out for to know that your font isn't working properly. And then we'll show you how to fix those or how to correct those issues. Again, I want to note here, it's important to note that it's actually pretty difficult to create an issue with a TrueType font. But we'll go ahead and do our best to break one today live and then see if we can fix it for you. Now, before we hop into the demonstration, do we have any quick questions before we get going?
No questions so far. So just a last reminder as we get into this, start thinking about, everybody's workflows, your workflow, and any issues that might have arisen, and try to get those into the Q&A so we can kind of get them queued up for when they come up in the presentation. Keep going.
Sweet, let's get going then. Okay, so here is my web browser. I have a few tabs open at the top. These are going to be some of those sources that I shared with you in the spreadsheet or in my slideshow a moment ago. The reason I'm here, this website is called 1001 Fonts. They're a good place to get fonts. And this is a great example of how to source and what to look for when you're sourcing a font. So this font here called Exo Regular is an awesome font. If I click here, I can see more information about it. First and foremost, what you want to look for is the font type. As you can see here, if I were to download these are all OTFs. That means these are open type fonts. So unfortunately, this font is not going to work for us in CAD. But I want to point it out to you because it is a great example of a font that has everything we're looking for. As I scroll down here, you can see the font family, which is going to show me every variation of the font. So I have Exo Regular, Thin, Extra Light, and so on. And let's say you find a font like this that you love, but it's an OTF. This example could also be if you have an SHX font that you love using, it's worth looking through these sources and trying to find an equivalent that is a TTF. Oftentimes you can find exact matches or you can find similar matches. For example, here at Google Fonts, I was able to track down the exact same font in TTF version. So just because you find an OTF font here doesn't mean that's the end of the trail for you trying to be able to use that font. So if I come here to Google, this is Google Fonts. They have a lot of really good free fonts. One thing I like about Google is their fonts are really robust. They tend to have great families. So you have a lot of different line weight options with your fonts. And they tend to have really robust built out glyph or character maps. So like I said, the first thing you want to look for is the file type and track down a font that is going to be a TTF. Whether you're trying to find an equivalent for an SHX font or an equivalent for an OTF font, there's a good chance you'll be able to find one. Once you track down the font that you want and you find a TTF version of it, the next thing you're going to want to check out is the glyph or the character set. Some sources will call them glyphs and some sources will call them the characters. So if I click on glyphs here on Google Fonts, it'll take me to all of the available glyphs for this font. So as you can see here, I've got my standard Latin lowercase characters. We have uppercase. And this is where the Google Fonts, or this font in particular, are really nice. We've got our numbers and fractions. We have all of our common Latin symbols. We have punctuation, and we even have currency symbols. So those things that you want to look for, or the things that I look for typically, are going to be currency symbols. The euro symbol in particular is useful. The plus minus symbol, the degree symbol, those are all going to be things that you're going to want to look for in a font. The plus minus is here, the degree is here. A lot of fonts specifically, or a lot of fonts will be missing certain characters. So it's really important to check the character or the glyph map before you decide to incorporate a font into your standard. You're going to want to make sure that it has everything you need. So that's 3 things we've checked off. We've found the font in the correct file type. We've found a font that has a font family that is adequate for our uses. And we have now checked that the glyphs are robust and filled out to our liking. Last but not least is you're going to want to check the licensing information for your font. This font is free to use for commercial and personal use, and you'll definitely want to dig into that before you go all in on a font. As you'll see here in a little bit, some fonts are only available for personal use, and you have to license them for commercial use. So just be aware of that before you just start using one willy-nilly. Another source, and this is my personal favorite, is called Font Squirrel. So fontsquirrel.com. And the reason I really like this, or there's 2 reasons I really like this source. Right off the bat here, you can see that every font on this website is free for commercial use. So that immediately eliminates one of our search criteria. And then one thing that is unique to Font Squirrel that I particularly like is their tag system. So most font sources will have their fonts organized by categories, which is fine. But what makes this tag system cool is a font can be tagged as multiple categories. So it gives you more options on how to narrow down your search. For this example, let's go ahead and check out some of these hand-drawn fonts. I know landscape architects tend to like that semi-hand-drawn look. And this one here is a great example, Architect's Daughter. So let's take a look at this font and let's compare this one to that EXO font so that we can learn a few things. So if I click here for more details, we already know that this one is free for commercial use, so we have that going for us. But if you scroll down here, you'll see that this one doesn't have a font family. So this one is only this one line weight. So if that's a deal breaker for you, if you need to have multiple line weights for every font, then this is probably one you'd want to turn away from. But we can also come here and check out the glyph map. And you can see as we scroll through, this one is fairly robust, but it's not up to the same standard as the EXO font was. However, it still has a lot of the key symbols that I personally would look for. It has the degree symbol, the plus or minus symbol, the euro symbol. Those ones seem to be red flags. If a font is missing those, I tend to steer away from them. So this one is actually pretty good. It's kind of a middle ground. It's got a decent character set. We probably wouldn't run into many issues on that front. It's free for commercial use, but it is limited in the font family. We'll go ahead and we'll download this one for the sake of today's demonstration. I've already downloaded it, so it's going to show here that it's been downloaded already once. So when you're sourcing your fonts, once you've kind of gone through that checklist, you can go ahead and download the font. You can specify where you want that on your computer. For my sake, I will just download it to my downloads folder. Another great source for fonts is dafont.com. When I first started looking into fonts, this is the first website I found. Again, this one's really nice because the categories are right here at the top. So you can just immediately jump into something that sounds interesting to you. Again, we'll go here to the handwritten ones. Now, when you're using this website, unlike Font Squirrel, you need to pay more attention to the licensing information because they're not all going to be necessarily free for commercial use. As you can see here, this one's free for personal use. This one's a demo. This one up top said it was 100% free. So if we're just scrolling through and we pick a font, let's say this one that's called Please Write Me a Song, we don't want to start going through our checklist again. Here, free for personal use, you can see also here in the terms of use, you can see that it is free for personal use, but not for commercial use. So again, if you are really in love with this font, then you might be willing to license it. You would have to look into that further. This one, just like the other font that we looked at, it does not have a very well built out family. So that's another thing kind of in the negative column for this one. And as you can see, compared to the previous font, it's got even a more limited character set. So this would be an example of a font that you probably would not want to use. It might suit your needs. You might not need all the special characters, and you might really love the look of it and be willing to pay for a commercial license. But I would probably recommend finding a better font because there's so many good free ones available. Moving on, another great
Hey,
source.
James,
Yeah,
really quick. We got just a few questions coming in just from like
sure.
as you're browsing these, how are you actually identifying that they're TrueType? And I know the
Oh,
websites in general are TrueType font websites, so there's that going for them. But as you were on like the Architect's Daughter one and comparing it to the previous guy,
mhm.
how are you actually seeing and confirming that it is indeed a TrueType font?
That's a really good question. That's one of those things that is going to be particular to each website. So not every website is going to show that information in the same place. Here for Font Squirrel, it's really obvious here that it says it's a TTF, right? But if I come back here to the tag system and I click on this hand-drawn one, as I scroll through, you can see here in blue, it shows you the font type. Now, back here to the 1001 fonts, it's similar to Squirrel font, Font Squirrel, I'm sorry.
I like
Uh,
Squont Furl better.
Squont Furl, yeah, that was a mix up. This one you can see is clearly labeled as an OTF. So like I was pointing out, it's just one of those things that you have to investigate when you're looking at a font. So you'll want to first look for the font type. In this case here, you can search by font type. On Google Fonts, I'm not sure exactly if you can search by font type. So let me see.
I want
Yeah,
to say it was in the properties. I don't know if you click into one of those and then look into its list there somewhere. I can't remember
yeah.
where I
So
actually saw it.
the next thing I was about to get onto was Microsoft's website. And this kind of ties in. So Microsoft will oftentimes discontinue fonts from version to version. And you don't quote me on this, but I believe Arial and Narrow is an example of one Microsoft has discontinued as including as a default, but they still offer it on their website. Here you can see that it's a TTF font. Again, you're going to look at the file extension. So if all else fails, when you download the font, you can see what type of font it is. A TrueType font will be a .ttf. OpenType font will be a .otf. But the reason I was going to show Microsoft's website is when you're looking at a source for these fonts, they're not all created equal. I personally love Font Squirrel because it's very user friendly and intuitive, and all that information is readily available. Where when I browse through fonts on Microsoft, I feel like I kind of have to dig around more for the information. So the short answer to that question is it depends on where you're sourcing the font. They're all going to be showing the information in different places. But if all else fails, you can always download it and then see what the actual file extension is on the font themselves.
Yep,
I hope that answers the question. I know
that's
it's probably not
perfect.
the answer anybody wanted, but it's not necessarily a one size fits all situation.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. And I think as we get into it more, when you're actually downloading them, it's going to be very apparent on what you actually installed. Because I know too, as you download fonts, my experience has been it will actually download all available font types for that font as well. So it'll be kind of like a package deal where you can actually see, oh, it came with an OTF, an SHX, and a TTF version or something. So sometimes they will just literally be bundled all together. So you will need to obviously look at, once that downloaded file is there, look at it and install the correct one as well. So
Yeah, the end all be all will be the file extension. So moving on here, I just wanted to show Adobe fonts. Again, this probably won't be a great source to directly get fonts for CAD because they tend to be open type, but they are high quality fonts, and a lot of them are based off of type 1 fonts, which means there's a good chance you can find a TrueType equivalent. So kind of like that EXO example that I showed in the beginning, if you have an Adobe font that you use, there's a good chance you'll be able to find an equivalent version. So that kind of wraps up how to source your fonts, what to look for, and some of my favorite places to look for fonts. Do we have any other questions about sourcing before we start looking at how to install fonts?
Yes, slightly. And this one, I'm going to do my best to answer, but just to put this out there, what is the legal definition of commercial use? And my personal opinion is anything that's going on to a plan that is going to be used out in the industry and you get money for. So I think the clearest definition is if you're gaining monetary or getting monetary gains from it, that would be commercial use. However, big or small scale that is, I would consider that commercial use. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but I'm sure there's a legal version out there too that you would need to find.
Yeah, it's worth noting that we're not lawyers, so please don't take that advice and then blame us.
Yes, that is
Um,
my own personal opinion.
I agree. I think that's if you're gonna monetize the font. Let's see if I have one here. There's always going to be a specific license for every font. So I'm sure that if you get into the actual license information, it's spelled out pretty clearly. I'm just looking here really quick to see if I see a quick answer, but definitely do your due diligence when you look at these license informations. You don't want to get in trouble. There's no need for that when there's so many good free fonts out there. Okay, let's go ahead and minimize this and we'll hop into CAD. So I'm kind of putting the cart before the horse here. I just want to show something in CAD before we work on installing fonts. If I type style, it'll open up my text style manager. And if I click here on this drop-down menu where the font name is, this is going to show me a list of all of the fonts that CAD can see. So this is all of the fonts that I have access to. So when we properly install a font, it'll show up here in this list. Now, when you're going through this list, it's really easy to tell what type of font you're looking at because all of the SHX fonts will be shown with the .shx at the end. And then all of the others that don't have the ending are going to be your TrueType fonts. So when you're going into CAD and you're setting up your text styles or you're picking a font to use, that's going to be the #1 factor to look for. Make sure you choose the appropriate type of font that you wish to use. And our recommendation is always to use a TrueType font over an SHX if it's available. I'm going to go ahead and close my CAD now, and we'll work on installing a couple fonts. In my experience, especially in preparation for this presentation, I always find that when I install fonts, restarting CAD seems to be less prone to issues. So I would always recommend closing CAD, installing your fonts, and then starting CAD fresh after the fonts are installed. If I come here to my downloads folder, you'll see that I have 2 fonts here downloaded, 2 of them that we looked at. So I've got EXO and I've got this one called Architect's Daughter. Let's go ahead and install these. So when you download them, they're going to look like they're going to be a zip folder. So when you extract them, you can right click and you can say extract all, and it'll ask you to specify where you want them extracted to. So this is important. If you have a specific destination that you store your fonts, you'll want to make sure that you extract them to that location. In this case, for today's presentation, I'm just going to extract them here into my downloads folder, and that's what these are. So you can see I have both .zips. I extracted both of them, and now they're right here in my downloads folder. So just to begin with one, let's start with Architect's Daughter. And then here is what we were talking about when you're actually going to install the font, if this download folder was more of a group of fonts and there were different versions, you'd want to make sure you select the .ttf version. If you check here, the type column, it says TrueType font. So there might be a case where you download them and you see other types of fonts in there. Just note that TTF is going to be the font we want to use for CAD. So to install is pretty straightforward. You're just going to right click, and choose show more options, and we want to install for all users. Again, like I said in the slideshow, if you just choose install, it's only going to install for the current profile you're logged in for on your computer. So we just want to install it for all users, which means you're installing it for the entire computer essentially. And just like that, you're done. So that font is now installed. So if I were to open up CAD and go to my text style manager, I would now see Architect's Daughter listed in the list. However, before we do that, let's go and install this EXO font. So this one doesn't necessarily have a TTF, but it has these variable font ones. We don't want to mess around with those. We want to open up this static folder. And here we can see these are all the fonts that were listed in that font family. So I really like this font because it has so many options for you. So if you're one of those people that likes using the same font in different contexts, this is going to be a great example for you. So just like with the other font, we can actually select all of these in the folder. I believe there's 18 of them, and we can install these all at the same time. So just select them all, and then I right click, and I can go to show more options, and I can install these for all users. And it's really fast. So, I mean, that took a few seconds and it installed 18 fonts on the computer. So this is the important step. If you're going to be doing this office wide, you'll want to make sure that you do this process for every machine that's going to need to use that font, because these fonts are installed on the computer. They're not stored in CAD. So now that we have all of these EXO variants installed, and we have that other Architect's Daughter font installed, let's go ahead and open up CAD and take a look at that. While CAD's opening, are there any questions about how to install fonts?
No, that was very straightforward.
Sweet. Yeah, it's really simple. It's not as intimidating as it might sound at first.
I guess we can just end the webinar right there.
I mean, honestly, that is going to be the most critical part of it, but we will show you how to troubleshoot them on the off chance you do run into any issues. So I'm going to go ahead and close drawing one, and I'm going to open a drawing that I have a schedule in so we can see some text. Okay, so here I have a drawing and I have just a dummy schedule. You don't really need to worry about any of the contents of the schedule. Just this is a good example because we'll have a schedule title and we'll have the schedule text. So we'll be able to play with both of those. So immediately, if I just open my style manager and I want to choose to change the style of my schedule text, I can go ahead and choose this drop down menu here. And now I should have my new fonts. So as you can see here, I've got Architect's Daughter. And here it'll give you the preview of the font. And if I go ahead and I say apply, it's going to update the text in the body of my schedule here. So we'll go ahead and we'll apply that. And then when I close, you can see now it's switched over and we can see our new font in action. If we want to do the same thing for our schedule title, we can come down here and we can choose one of those new EXO variants. So they're going to be alphabetical in this list. So here we have all of the different versions of that EXO font. So if I choose EXO, it'll give me a preview here. If I choose black, it'll give me a preview. If I choose semi-bold, it'll give me a preview. So when I find the one I want, I can go ahead and apply. And there you go, it's updated. So really, that's how easy it is to install and start implementing new fonts. So if you're one of those people that has been using SHX fonts for a long time, and you just haven't switched over yet, you can now see how simple it is. One note, because I just changed those in my text style manager really quick, if I use the read command to regenerate all my text, it's going to default back to my preference set text style defaults. So if we want to take a look at those, we can open up our text manager here on our FX site ribbon. And here, this is going to give us the text manager. And what this is going to allow us to do is set our text styles for preference set. So any drawing that has the preference set, those will be the default text styles. So if we wanted to set our scheduled text, let's say to something else, how about we do, oh, okay, this is great. So here you can see the newly installed fonts are not in this list, and that's because these are only fonts that have been used previously. So what I'll want to do to incorporate one of my new fonts here is choose the Add New button. Once I click Add New, it's going to give me all of the fonts that I have available. So if I want to set up a new preference set with my new font, let's say we want Architect's Daughter to be the body of our schedule, we can go ahead and select it. We'll get a preview, and when we say OK, it's going to prompt us to name it. We'll just leave it as is. And now we have Architect's Daughter set to our scheduled text in our preference set. So whenever we start a new drawing and we apply the preference set, we can expect this text to show. So I'll just go ahead and I'll update the scheduled text definition. And when I go ahead and close out of here, it's going to update. So now you can see the body of my schedule has switched to the Architect's Daughter font. And now that's also my preference set default. So if I start a new drawing and I apply this preference set, it will automatically pull that in. Just to show that again, show how easy it is, we can do the same thing for our scheduled text, or I'm sorry, our scheduled title. Again, if we want to use one of those EXO fonts, we'll have to add new. And then we can come down here and we can scroll down to E. And again, we can pick which one of these variants that we want. So when you have a well built out font family with these variations of line weights, it kind of negates the argument for SHX fonts being superior in that aspect. So we'll go ahead and we'll just add our scheduled title and we'll make it EXO bold. And just like that, we have our preference set updated. Now, you can see how easy it is to install and work with TTF fonts. What are some of the issues you can run into? Well, if you're ever in here in your text manager and you use this font drop-down menu, if you see duplicated entries here, that's a sign that you have an issue. For example, if I have Architect's Daughter here, if I try to add a new Architect's Daughter, it should warn me that it's already been added. It says that font is already installed, and it's not going to allow me to duplicate it. So it's actually really hard to to break that. So if you ever are in this list and you see a duplicate, if this said Architect's Daughter 2 times or Architect's Daughter _1 or something like that, that should be a red flag to you that there's something weird going on there and it's worth looking into further. Let me go ahead and close CAD again. When you go to install a font twice, so to go back and install a font on your machine, it gives you the same warning. So if I try to install this font again, I'll do show more and I'll install for all users. It's going to warn me that the font already exists and it's going to ask me if I want to replace it. So it doesn't matter if I say yes or no here, it's just going to have the same font. The reason I want to show you that is because the #1 issue that CAD runs into with TrueType fonts is when there's a font installed twice. And you can see now, I tried installing it on my preference set twice, and I tried installing the font on my computer twice, and both times it warned me that it was already installed, and it didn't let me do that because that would create issues. Now, I haven't been able to narrow down how this actually occurs. It could be something related to Windows updates or something, but occasionally somebody will have a duplicate entry of a font, and that will create issues in CAD. So first of all, let's show you how to check if you have duplicate entries. And then I'm going to break it. I'm going to manually create a duplicate entry, and then I'll show you how to fix it. So first and foremost, what you'll want to do is you'll want to bring up your run dialog box here on your computer. If you haven't used it recently and it's not showing in your list, you can just use the search bar to type in run. Now it'll look like this when it pops up. If you're not familiar with it, this should show the last entry that you used, or it'll be blank. What we want to do is we want to type regedit. So regedit. That stands for registry editor. And we'll want to say okay. And it's going to ask us, are we sure we want to open the registry editor? And we want to say yes. Now, because I was already in here using this, I've already drilled down to the location that we'll want to be at ultimately. So let me collapse this so I can show you the file path here. This might seem intimidating at first. It might seem like a lot of steps, but it's one of those things. It's really, you got to do it once and then you're done. And it's not as intimidating as it might seem. So when you open up the registry editor, it should look something like this. And what we'll want to do is expand this H key local machine. We'll want to expand software. We'll want to expand Microsoft. We'll want to go to the bottom of Microsoft, way down here. We'll want to expand Windows NT, current version, and lastly, fonts. Up here at the top, you can see that long file path. And what we can do to avoid having to drill all the way down here anytime that we need to come back, we can go ahead and click on this favorites and we can add to favorites. We can name it fonts and say okay. So anytime we open the registry editor, if it's not already here, we can just go ahead to our favorites and choose fonts and it'll take us straight to this. So once you do this one time on your computer, you don't really have to memorize the file path any longer. So what this is going to do is it's going to show you every font that's entered in your registry. And if I look, I can see Architect's Daughter here. I have the name column and I have the data column. Now these are going to be really important to pay attention to. It matters a lot less. It almost doesn't matter what it's called here in this name, but you really need to pay attention to what the font is called in the data tab. So what we did when we tried to install it, the computer checked the registry, it saw that it was here, it looked at the data tab and it said, oh, you've already got that file, you can't install it again. But if I go ahead and I rename this one, so if I call this one maybe -2, now it's going to have a different name. So when I go to install it, it's actually going to install the same font twice. And what's going to happen is when I install the font, it's going to look in this name column. It's going to say, oh, there's no Architect's Daughter TrueType. We only have -2. So it'll actually install and it'll create a duplicate. So if I come back to my font here and I install it just like we did before, it's going to go ahead and install. And now when I refresh my registry editor, you're going to see I have Architect's Daughter TrueType 2, the one that I renamed, and now the new entry. But if you look here in the data tab, it's now created a duplicate entry, and this is what's going to create issues and break it for us in CAD. So if you go into CAD and you had Architect's Daughter set for your preference set, or you had already set it for your scheduled text in a drawing, and you go in and it's showing, let's say, Arial or some other font, that is immediately a red flag to you to know that there's something wrong with the font. Again, you could then double check that by going to your text manager and seeing if there's a duplicate entry there. That would be another red flag. So this is really the only thing that can go wrong with TrueType fonts when you're using them. So now what we'll do is we'll try to fix it. The solution is to fix this registry editor so that we only have one entry. So simply I can just select them and I can delete them. Now, in some cases, and this could be the end of the road for you, but in every time that I was testing this, I would reinstall the font, go into CAD, and it would still be broken. And that's because we've only removed the font, the duplicate entry from our registry editor. Now we want to check our directory. To check the directory, we want to open our command prompt. So if you go to your Windows search bar, you can type command prompt. I have it right here because I've used it recently. Oh, and see, I just did this again. What you want to do when you open your command prompt, this is very important. You want to run it as administrator. Otherwise, you're going to get through this step and you're not going to have the permissions to delete the font. So let's open this again. When I right click on the command prompt, I want to choose run as administrator. This is going to allow me to edit anything in there. And then it's going to warn me, are you sure you want to open it? And we'll say yes. Okay. So this is also going to seem intimidating, but it's actually really simple if you just follow the steps very carefully. So what we want to do is check our directory for the font entries. And how you do that is you type cd space /Windows. Oh, I can't type. /fonts. Just like that. And when you hit enter, it's going to give you a C Windows fonts prompt. And what we'll type is dir for directory, and we'll hit enter. And this has generated a list of all of the font entries in this directory. So with these being alphabetical, let's scroll to the very top and we'll find Architect's Daughter. And you can see here we have both entries. So we've got the original one and the duplicate one. So we want to remove them from here, just like we did with our registry. And the way you do that is I'm going to scroll down here to the top so you can see where my cursor is. We want to type del for delete, space, and then the full font name, including the file extension. And caps doesn't matter here. So if we type Architect's Daughter .ttf and we hit enter, it's going to delete that font. And if we use the up key, it'll give us our last entry, and we can come down here and we can add the _0 for the other one, and we can delete that one as well. Now those should be deleted. We can check that by typing dir again and running the registry or running the directory one more time. Let's scroll up to the top to confirm. So here we're at the top, and Architect's Daughter would have been in here. So we've successfully deleted them now in both the directory and in the registry. So once they're completely removed from both of those locations, we're okay to come back and reinstall it. So go back to where your font lives, show more options, install for all users. And what that's going to do is going to give you a fresh install. If you want to confirm that, you can go back to run, type regedit, say yes, and you can go to favorites fonts if it's not already at this location. And you can see now we're down to a single font entry. There's no duplicates and there's no issues. So now when we open up CAD, we should be able to use this font again with no issues. And this was one that actually took a lot of troubleshooting because I had found that I was only removing the font from the registry and I didn't know about the directory at first. So I kept running into issues. I would delete it from the registry, reinstall it fresh, and I'd come back to CAD and in my text manager here, sorry, I gotta set this drawing up because I don't have my other drawing. What would happen is when I would go to add the text to my text style, I would have more than one entry here. It would say Architect's Daughter twice. And so that would be a red flag for me to know that it's wrong. And it didn't matter which one I chose. It would give me an error saying that the font is not installed. So if you ever get an error message that says warning Architect's Daughter.ttf is not installed, this is almost definitely going to be the issue you ran into. So you'll want to run through those troubleshooting steps. Both start in the registry and remove both entries. And then there could be more than one entry. There could be 3 or 4. You'll want to get them all out of there. And then you'll want to confirm in that directory that they're not listed there as well. I know that was kind of a lot of information. Are there any questions, or do we need to run through any examples on how to remove those corrupt font entries?
No questions right now. This is last call for questions for sure. I did want to just mention one thing that we didn't fully see because you removed them prior to seeing the duplicates in here.
Let me break it for you while you talk.
So breaking it, I think it's just going to be good to see you add that font back in so that there are 2 entries in there, because the way to remove that, because we might still see a duplicate Architect's Daughter inside of that list. And that's where we need to use that delete font command within CAD to just remove it from the list. So we might see only one on the CAD style side, the textile side on the CAD side, but in that land effects list, there still might be multiple entries, and that's just a simple cleaning up of that list, and that's using the delete font tool within CAD. So I just wanted to show that if we could.
Yeah, we'll do that right now. Let me open my example drawing. Okay. And as you can see here, I have manually broken it again. So I have 2 entries, just like we showed. Now, sorry, CAD is loading. Okay. So now if I were to come up here to my text manager, and I choose my schedule text, and I have architect's daughter here. Let's say I want to add new. Now I can add architect's daughter 2. Did that not add?
Try adding just the regular one again.
Let me see, architect's daughter.
There it goes.
Yeah. So now that I've added that twice, if I come here to my text manager and I choose my schedule text, there's 2 entries.
Yep.
So that is a major red flag. If this ever happens, you know you have some issue going on related to your font entries. So one way to fix that to begin is to use your delete font tool. So if you use the drop down menu here under text manager, you have delete font, and it's going to open up the list. And what you'll want to do in this case is you'll want to delete both versions. If you had more than 2 versions, you'd want to make sure you go ahead and clear all of them out. And once you've removed them from the list, then you'd want to close down CAD, and you'd want to go through the steps to delete them in the registry and the directory, and then do a fresh install of that font, and then come back to CAD and confirm that there's only 1 entry again. If you don't do that, the issue will persist. I can even show you. So I've deleted them from that list. If I exit CAD, and then let's say I only do the registry fix, so I only delete them from here. And this is what I had done originally. So this was the learning curve for me personally. Then I reinstall. Now, typically, if I come back into CAD, I should, in my registry, only have 1 entry. While CAD loads, I can show you that. So you might actually look here. And this is important to know, because if you check the registry, which you should always check first, and you see, oh, I only have 1 entry here, you can see how it still has the _1. That's a dead giveaway to you that the font still exists in the directory. And I can illustrate that again if I delete it from my registry. So it's gone. Now, if I reinstall it, what's going to happen is, let me refresh this. Now it's going to show _2. So even if you only have 1 entry in your registry, but you notice there's a dash any number 0, 1, 2 on, you know you have duplicate entries in the directory. So if I were to open the directory now, just to show you, I could type cd space /windows /fonts, hit enter, and then type dir for directory and hit enter. When I scroll to the top for architect's daughter, you'll see here, it's just been adding a new entry to the directory each time. So it's got the original one, then 0, 1, 2. And so if you're only trying to fix this from the registry, you're just going to keep adding entries to the directory, and that's going to break things for you in CAD. And I can't stress that enough. So what you want to do is, if you run into any issues in CAD, come to the directory and check this data column here. This is going to be the first place to look. But it's worth emphasizing, this almost can't happen. It by default won't let you install more than 1. You either have to come in and manually break it like I did, or there has to be some kind of weird issue that I haven't identified yet that creates the error. Did that answer your question, Jake, or clarify what you were pointing out?
Yep, I think that's good. And I think I don't have any other questions. So I think just from a global standpoint, this ending of this this webinar is more, don't get scared, because this, again, we literally had to force break it to try to show how to fix it, just so that we had it on record to be able to fix it if it ever happened. But the pros completely outweigh the cons, just in general. So uh, I love seeing all the new different types of fonts available and stuff like that. It's very cool. So
Yeah, and one final note for me personally is don't be afraid to dig around for fonts. There's a lot of really cool free fonts out there. I was pleasantly surprised when I went looking for fonts.
one last question. I think we can squeeze this one in. They ask, what happens if you have used the font in your drawing and you don't realize you have used the duplicate font? What would you do? Or would the software not let you do that? So I'll maybe try to answer that. So if you've actually successfully got an incorrect font and it's in your font list and in the registry, and it's placing as such, then it is going to be defined in the drawing. Nothing technically is going to happen. If that font goes missing and you end up cleaning up your drawing, it's just going to get replaced with your missing font style, basically. And so it might look different, but if you reload that font, it should kick back. I think the worst that you would have to do is just select it and match properties on a newly placed one, or redefine that style that's in the drawing. Hopefully that.
I have it broken still in the registry, so I still have _2. So for me right now, it's broken. If I add architect's daughter here to my schedule text, if I go to run this, it should throw an error saying that the text here, this
Correct.
is the error. So it says architect's daughter _2 TTF not installed. So if you ever run into this error telling you your font's not installed and there's an underscore number, that's the exact problem. That's the dead giveaway. That means you need to go in and do those steps to
yeah,
fix it.
and that'll make it so you just can't place it. But I think they're asking if it's already placed and then somehow it's broken. So the true architect's daughter is already placed. I think it just relinks itself, because it's always going to be looking at that original clean version to begin with. So if you remove those errant ones, or you find that it's errant, then I think it'll just relink itself once you load it back proper. So it's always going to just misalign when you try to place it, and it is the incorrect one. I don't think you'll ever be able to place it. So it'll always just be original good one placed. Something goes wrong, you fix it, and the original one will continue to be linked up to it again.
Cool. Thank you. Any other questions?
That is it, guys. Thank you so much. Have a lovely weekend. Enjoy the sun, and enjoy those TrueType fonts.